Hi everyone, and welcome to the Improving Posture Workshop. My name is Marissa Chin, and I'm the Reconditioning Manager for Garrison, Toronto, but our team also supports Southwestern Ontario and Meaford. I'll be starting the workshop off with a PowerPoint presentation going over some of these topics, including the definition of posture, what good posture looks like, the importance of good posture, what affects posture. We'll do a quick self-assessment. I'll go over some tips to improve posture, and then I have invited the Toronto Fitness, Sports, and Recreation staff to help me with some exercise demonstrations as well. If you don't have time to watch the whole workshop, please feel free to skip ahead to any specific topic using the times below. Let's get started. Posture, by definition, refers to the body's alignment and positioning with respect to gravity. It can be static, which refers to how you hold yourself up when you're not moving, like when you're sitting or sleeping, or it can be dynamic, which is how you hold yourself up when you're moving, such as walking, running, or playing sports. You could even argue that all posture or postural control is dynamic by nature because no matter what position your body's in, your muscles are making thousands of tiny contractions just to keep your position in check. Now let's take a look at what good standing posture looks like. If you're able to, I'd like you to try and stand up and get into this position. You want to start by lifting up your chest, which allows you to bring your head back so your ears are directly above your shoulders. Tuck your chin and make sure it's parallel to the floor. Next, engage your core so your hips are directly below the shoulders and not rolled forward or back. Let your arms hang naturally down the sides of your body, thumbs pointing forward, and stand with your feet about shoulder width apart. Your ears, shoulders, hips, knees, and ankles should all be in a straight line. Take a second to think about how this feels. Is it natural to you, or do you have to consciously make an effort to put yourself in this position? How does this compare to how you usually stand? When you're ready, you can take a seat, and we'll move on to what good seated posture looks like. A lot of people spend the majority of their day sitting down, whether it's working, studying, commuting, or even relaxing at home. If you're able to, let's try to get into this position. Similar to standing, you want to lift your chest, which allows for a neutral head position. Your shoulders should be relaxed and in line with your ears. Your upper arm should be vertical, with your elbows close to your body. Your core is engaged to maintain a neutral spine, with your hips between 90 and 100 degrees. Your knees should be at the same height or slightly lower than your hips. And finally, your feet should be flat on the floor or use a footrest if needed. So why is good posture so important? No matter what position you're in, gravity is exerting a force on our joints, ligaments, and muscles. When you have good posture, no one structure is overstressed. If you think about a building, the foundation has to be strong in order to resist the weather, weight, and stresses over its years, and our body is exactly the same. A healthy spine is our foundation. We need good posture to keep our bones and joints in correct alignment and our muscles moving correctly. If you don't maintain good posture or support your back, it can add strain to the muscles and put stress on our spine. Stress of poor posture can change the anatomical characteristics of the spine, leading to the possibility of constricted blood vessels and nerves, degenerative arthritis, and muscle and joint pain. Having a neutral spine is a key part of good posture and refers to the proper alignment of the natural curves in our spine, especially the top three. As you can see in the diagram, the cervical spine covers the neck region, thoracic spine covers the torso, and the lumbar spine covers the lower back. Maintaining a neutral spine is important for weight and force distribution and can reduce the risk of spinal issues that may result from bad posture. To the right of the neutral spine diagram, there are 3 spine curvature disorders. The first is scoliosis, which is characterized by a lateral curve of the spine, oftentimes an S or C shape. Kyphosis, or hunchback, is characterized by a rounded upper back, accentuating the thoracic curve. And finally, lordosis, often called swayback, is characterized by an exaggerated lumbar curve. Our pelvis plays a large part in maintaining a neutral spine, specifically in the lumbar region. We want a neutral pelvis, and we want to avoid a posterior or anterior pelvic tilt. If we overengage our glutes and tilt our pelvis backwards or posteriorly, our back will be flat or slightly flexed. On the other hand, if our pelvis is tilted forward or anteriorly, our erectors are engaged, our hip flexors are tight, and that results in an excessive lumbar or lordotic curve. Neither of these positions are optimal. We want to find and set our natural curves, pain-free, and strengthen the structures surrounding the spine and pelvis so we can maintain this position. Luke, the physical exercise specialist from Gagetown, posted a video on breathing and bracing techniques in 3 segments: position, tension, and breathing. And he also goes over neutral spine. This is a great video and can be found on our YouTube page. Let's talk about the factors that affect our posture. Starting with injuries. Injuries can limit your range of motion and strength. Depending on where the injury is, it can affect your ability to maintain a neutral spine or proper alignment. Next is stress. Both acute and chronic stress can have physical, emotional, mental, and behavioral effects, which include a clenched jaw or slouched shoulders. And finally, one of the main factors that affects our posture is spending a lot of time in one position. And I'll go over some examples. The first is a job-specific movement, like a manufacturing job on an assembly line, construction, or manual labor jobs. Next is prolonged sitting. Think about office work, driving, or even relaxing at home. This can affect our posture, especially if you're slouching or have bad posture. You might have heard the term sitting is the new smoking, which refers to the growing epidemic of sedentary lifestyles. The average person now spends 9.3 hours a day sitting. Studies of sedentary behavior suggest that sitting for extended periods of time also increases a person's chances of developing a wide range of illnesses, including cardiovascular disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Another position we spend a lot of time in is looking down at our phones. A lot of us have this forward head, text neck posture. But if you look at this diagram, our head weighs about 10 to 12 pounds when in a neutral position. But as we look down 15, 30, 45, and 60 degrees, the pressure on our spine dramatically increases. And finally, we have our sleep position. If you think about it, any position we are in for a long time can affect our posture, and we sleep for hours a night. If you've slept the same way your whole life, that's years in one position, which could definitely affect your posture. All of these can lead to muscle imbalances, which may cause structures to compensate and therefore hinder your ability to move effectively. Think of someone who carries a purse or backpack on the same shoulder every day, or an athlete that uses the same arm for thousands of repetitions. As you hold these positions for a period of time, your body is sending those patterns to your brain and turning it into muscle memory. So ultimately, if you have a good static or dynamic posture, it will be easier for your body to move and do things. Exercise and lifestyle changes can help to counteract the factors that negatively affect our posture. We can mobilize and stretch tight structures and strengthen our body to hold ourselves upright to fix muscle imbalances. Before I go into the exercise and stretch demos, I'd like to give you an opportunity to assess your own posture and identify any areas that may need improvement. You can take a moment later or pause the video on this slide to assess your posture. Have someone take some photos or stand in front of the mirror as naturally as possible. The first photo is the ideal good posture, the second is fair, and the last is poor. So if we start with our head, you want to see if your head is sitting right on top of your shoulders in a neutral position. Your shoulders, you want them to be level, and you don't want to see one raised higher than the other. Your spine, hopefully, is nice and straight. Your hips are level, not shifted to one side. Your ankles, you don't necessarily have to be standing with your feet together, but you want to see that your feet are facing forward, or if they naturally turn out or collapse in or out. Your neck, again, we want to see that neutral position. Our upper back, you don't want it to be rounded. Same thing with our trunk. You want to stand in a straight line and not sway back. Your abdomen in a straight line. And finally, our lower back, so you want to see if there's that natural curve and neutral spine or if it's exaggerated. Once you've assessed your posture, you can follow these tips to improve posture, starting with some quick lifestyle changes. The first is posture awareness. Now that you know what good posture standing and seated looks like, you can actively try to get into this position. I know personally when I was planning for this workshop, and even now, I'm trying to get into good posture. So that is a good step in the right direction. If you're working at a desk, you can also purchase more ergonomic furniture or make your furniture more ergonomic. For example, you can use books to lift up your laptop so it's closer to eye level when you're working, or even use a counter as a standing desk. Or you can put a towel or pillow behind your lower back to promote that nice neutral spine posture. Next is to take breaks. If you're in the same position for a long time, try to take a break. After sitting for an hour, we should all make an effort to stand or walk for 1 to 2 minutes. You can even do some exercises at your desk, which I will go through shortly. Next is to take a break from your phone. Here are 4 tips to avoid text neck. You want to make an effort for your head to be in a neutral position, which we learned is ears aligned with shoulders. You can hold your phone in front of your face rather than lower and look down, which we learned increases the weight of our head, putting more stress on our spine. If you do look down, try to just look with your eyes. And finally, avoid spending hours hunched over looking at your phone, and remember to take frequent breaks. Finally, try to distribute weight evenly by holding your bag on 2 arms, and if you can't, try to switch up which hand or arm you use to carry things regularly. And now for our sleep position. If you've been sleeping the same way for years, it may be difficult to switch positions now. But you can use pillows to put yourself in a good neutral spine position. The bottom 3 diagrams show you where to place your pillows for good spinal support. And although it's not shown here, if you are a side sleeper and you bend your knees, you could place a pillow between your knees so that your top hip doesn't collapse down. And finally, the last tip to improve your posture is to exercise. So we can exercise and stretch regularly and with good form to help improve your posture. And I'll go through some of those exercises now. I'll be going over 3 different movements, including mobility exercises, static stretches, which will hold for a longer period of time, and finally, strengthening exercises. You can hold each stretch for about 30 seconds and complete 8 to 12 reps of each mobility and strength exercise, or more or less depending on your fitness level. Please do not use this video to avoid going to your healthcare professional or replace the advice they give you. If you're a military member with an injury or chit, please consult your local reconditioning team before doing these exercises. These are fairly general movements, but PSP can tailor the exercises to your individual needs. Let's start with our neck. I mentioned a forward head position that a lot of us are in, also known as text neck, like Hannah is showing us here. And what we want to do is counteract that position by retracting our neck or bringing it into a neutral position so our ears are right above our shoulders. You can retract your neck for repetitions as an exercise, but you also want to make sure that your head is in this position throughout the day. Once your head is in the nice neutral position, you can do shoulder circles to loosen up your shoulders and your chest, like Marvin is showing us here. In addition to that forward head posture, we also tend to slouch, or our shoulders come forward, especially when we're on our phones texting, or if you sleep on your side. So make sure you do these nice and controlled and slowly, and get that full range by going all the way up and all the way back. You can do this sitting or standing. Next is an exercise I really like to do for your shoulders or upper traps and your neck. So what you'll do is be seated, make sure you're sitting up nice and tall with good posture to start. Then you will take one hand, reach behind you as if you're reaching into the opposite back pocket, and you will turn your head to the side and look down. So Marvin is showing us that here. Again, you're taking one hand, putting it in your back pocket, looking to that side, and looking down. So you'll feel that nice stretch in your neck, hopefully, and your upper traps. Another factor that contributes to us slouching our shoulders is tight pecs. If you have tight pecs, it can bring your shoulder joint forward into a non-optimal position. So what you can do is use a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, which is a bit softer, with this self-massage technique against a wall. So you'll place the ball here and roll the ball side to side, or if you find a spot that's really tight, you can just hold it there, whatever is comfortable for you. If you don't have a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball at home, you can do this doorway stretch. Some people will do this with two hands at the same time within a door frame, or you can just use one hand at a time like I've done here against a wall. So your hand will be up about 90 degrees, and then what you'll do is turn away from the wall until you feel that stretch here in your pec, and switch sides. We know we can use the lacrosse ball or a tennis ball to mobilize our pec here and loosen that up, but you can also turn around and use it on your upper back. So Hannah is showing us here how she can use the lacrosse ball on her upper traps, right along her shoulder, and also in the middle of her back, just below and around her shoulder blade. Again, same thing, you can either hold it onto one spot or move it around, whatever feels better for you. And make sure you do both sides. And one last stretch you can do to open up your chest is to do what Hannah's doing here, is simply just interlock your fingers, place it behind your head, and bring your shoulders out and your elbows out so you're opening up your chest, and hopefully you'll feel a nice stretch doing that. Now that we know we have to keep our shoulders back and we have some exercises to loosen up our chest, we want to get our posterior chain nice and strong. So Adrian here is going to show us two exercises. The first exercise is a band pull apart. So if you have a resistance band, you can hold it with two hands about chin to chest level, and then what you'll do is pull it apart nice and slowly and controlled while engaging your upper back and your shoulders, but also remembering to engage your core so we can maintain that nice neutral spine that we talked about. If you don't have a resistance band, you can do an exercise that I like to call YTL, and you can do this with no weight or light dumbbells if you have them. So Adrian is going to show us here, and what you're doing is bending over into a hip hinge position. So you want to keep your back nice and straight, maintaining that neutral spine still. And what you're going to do is open up your arms to essentially make those letters that I just said. So the first one is a Y, which means both of your hands come up above your head. Next is a T, they come out straight to the sides, and then an L, your elbows are bent at 90 degrees and you're bringing them out to the sides. Next, we want to mobilize the T-spine with an exercise called cat-cow, and you may be familiar with this, especially if you do yoga. But what you're going to do is get into a quadruped position, so you're on your hands and knees, with your hands right underneath your shoulders and your knees right underneath your hips. And then you will extend your spine and look up, and then round your spine and look down. And you want to try to do this in a nice smooth motion like Hannah's doing here. Next we'll move on to T-spine extension. Hannah here is holding onto the bleachers, but you can just place your hands against the wall. You can use a kitchen counter or table, or you can even do this at your desk seated. With your hands on the wall, you'll walk back and sit your hips back into a hinge so that you're able to keep your upper body nice and straight. So she's bringing her chest down and she's feeling a nice stretch there. And again, I mentioned if you're sitting down, especially if you have a wheelie chair, you can place your hands on your desk or the wall and bring your hips back into the chair just until wherever is comfortable. So you don't have to force yourself into this position if you can't get into it. Just do what's best for you. Let's move on to our core and lower body. We use the lacrosse ball or the tennis ball for our chest and our upper back, and now we're going to target our lower back, specifically the QL, or quadratus lumborum. This muscle attaches our rib cage to our pelvis, and it could also laterally flex our trunk or put it to the side. So what that means is if you have a hip hike, or one hip is higher than the other, this could be one of the muscles responsible for it if it's tight and one is shortened. So what you want to do is use the lacrosse ball against the wall the same way we used it for our upper body. And you can go up and down against the wall, or again, just hold it on one spot, whatever feels more comfortable for you. Next, we'll do a stretch for our lower back and glutes. You can do both legs at one time or one leg at a time. But Hannah here is going to show us one leg at a time So you'll start lying flat on the floor, bring one knee into your chest, and hold that there, and hopefully you feel a nice stretch. A great way to protect your back is to build a nice and strong core. So Hannah here is going to show us a couple different variations of a plank. The first is on your knees, or an assisted plank. So you'd be on your knees and your hands, and for each variation you want to make sure you're maintaining that nice neutral spine so your lumbar curve is not exaggerated and your hips are level with the rest of your body. So we have a kneeling plank. From there you can move into a high plank, which is on your hands and feet, making sure your hands are right underneath your shoulders, and again you have that nice straight line of your body. The next one is a forearm plank, and what I like here is that Hannah's hands are both facing forward. Some people like to bring their hands together here, but all that does is gives you the potential to round your shoulders when you're in that plank. So by putting them out in front of you, you're able to open up your chest. And finally, the most difficult variation here is a plank with shoulder tap. So you'll be on your hands and feet. You'll lift one hand and place it on that opposite shoulder, and you want to make sure you're minimizing rotation of the hips, so keep your core nice and tight and engaged. And these are just 4 examples or 4 variations of a plank, but there's so many more for you to try out. Another example of a core exercise is a suitcase carry, and I like this exercise because the weight is in one hand, which means you have to resist that motion of bending to one side, so your core is engaged, and you're also working on your posture by standing upright. So in this case, Kim is holding a kettlebell. You can hold it with one hand and take nice slow steps. Make sure you switch hands, but you can use a kettlebell, you can use a dumbbell, or a sandbag if you have one, and this is actually one of the carries for the intermittent loaded shuttles of the force test. The last stretch I wanted to show you is for your hip flexors. I mentioned in the presentation that we're often sitting for long periods of time, which can really make our hip flexors tight. So this stretch is a classic hip flexor stretch in a half kneeling position. One knee is down on the ground, the other knee is bent, and your foot is flat on the floor. You want to, again, maintain that nice neutral spine, engage your core, and squeeze your glutes. And if you want to get further into stretch, you can shift your weight forward slightly, making sure you're still sitting upright. I highly recommend doing a standing quad stretch before you go into the couch stretch. Hannah is showing us here. She has one knee bent and is standing on one foot. You want to keep your bent knee nice and close to your straight standing leg, and as always you want to maintain good posture throughout the exercise, so keeping your ears above your shoulders and your chest nice and tall. Make sure you do both sides again right before you go into the couch stretch. For this stretch, you'll need to have something behind you. So in this case, we're using the bleachers, but you could use a chair, a bench, or a couch. And you want to get your knee as close to that item as possible. So in this case, my knee is as close to the bleacher as I can get it. My foot is vertical, straight up from that. And then my front knee is doing the same thing as the original hip flexor stretch that I showed you. Hopefully after doing the self-assessment and identifying any areas, if any, that may need some improvement, you're able to pick and choose the exercises that are best for you. There are some great videos on our national page that I think go really well with this workshop done by other reconditioning staff. So Kingston Reconditioning posted a great video on low back health, Gagetown posted a great video on building your core, and for those who have an office job or want to take breaks from sitting, and I mentioned that's a really great thing to do, Baggetville posted a video on exercises to do at your desk. So these can all be found on our national YouTube page, as well as videos from our fitness and sports team in workshops or even live classes. If you have any other specific questions, please feel free to reach out to your local PSP staff. I'm sure they would be happy to help you. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something, and I hope you have a great day.